We all have the stories that resonate in us, and one of the reasons why we all have to talk about the confidence of our people when it comes to reporting this kind of news is that the people have this inherent conditioning that stories like this will not make an impact. But what is important for these people to know is that this kind of story takes time for it to fully relinquish itself to a better impact. But if we see a story as just a shotgun that if you shoot out of your news media organizations, you want it to have an immediate impact, that doesn't really define what a true story can be when it comes to talking about its reach to a large audience. And talking about the kinds of stories we write to leverage on the circumstance. For example, the war in Sudan is a typical example of what kinds of story the world wants. People are wailing, people are agitating that things are happening, but those are not particularly a story that really tells about what the Sudan situation is now. It is a two-party conflict, and those parties are not foreign parties, they're not exotic parties, they are local parties. And this typically means whatever they destroyed, whatever they managed to, bring it down, is not the problem of anybody outside. It is the same people that are fighting each other in the same community that will bear the consequences and implication. So calling people to know this consequence is one part of journalism that people don't really talk about, people don't really do. And the emergence of concept and approaches like the solution journalism, I think this is just more close to talking about what really have changed in communities, what really is developing in communities, what really communities are benefiting from certain projects or initiatives. But this doesn't imply that we're talking about what are these implications, especially in an intra-conflict like the Sudan, with the idea that storytelling can come in many forms, depending on which you can reach your hand to. But most important, visual storytelling and audio-visual storytelling makes more impact. The reason is quite simple. Reaching out to large audience defined by this belief that people are having more and more low retention when it comes to reading text story-based. But the fact still remains that those researchers, those people who are still classical representations of our community, I think will still love to read the text and even make more reference to. Because, for example, we still have these contemplations whether text is still the best form of representing story. Of course it is, classically, but the way social media is transforming how we perceived information, how we perceive things, these are all evidence that text-based is getting fades away. But the fact still remains that the text is more and more reason why those categories of people in our community still reach them, for improving literacy, for easy referencing. And the second thing I would like to talk about is the reason why these certain stories are more important than other stories you have written. But the fact is, all are your stories. Whatever you have written over the years, over your career, are still your stories. Whether they mark a groundbreaking moment of reaching a large audience or reaching just certain groups of people. What I want you to understand is that the larger audience you have means that the larger populations have come across your story. But that does not quantify, or that does not say that your story has reached, the right people who can act upon the story you have written, the purpose of the story. You can have 1,000 reached on Twitter, but if you have 2 to 3 to 5 reached on Facebook, and these reached are the people or the stakeholders that can act on these stories, I think which one has more impact? I think the one reaching on Facebook. Those on Twitter is just the clamor that you are having a large reach to one of your biggest story, as presumably biggest story. But the measurement and measuring impact of a story can be deceiving, because you see your story on Twitter is reaching 1 million people, 1 million audience. The question is it reaching the 1% of the 1 million people who are the people who can act on your story? That's what we need. It's not about doing the biggest story that is appealing to the eye, it is appealing to the senses, or it is a trend. Is it making that impact? Has it reached people that are affected? Let me give you an instance of a story I've written in one of these days. I reached to some displaced communities in Medjugorje, and after reaching, concluding, and meeting a lot of people, interviewing them, when I came back to write this story, what I saw was, how can this story go back to these communities so that they can watch it, so that they can see what they have said, so that they can reflect with this story? These are some of the questions that keeps on resonating in me when I'm writing a story, when my stories are published. And what quickly came to my mind is, but these people don't have access to internet. These people don't have access to the kinds of platforms you published your stories on. The story is just for those audience, not for them.